This is the wretched hypocrisy of Jacob Rees Mogg and his like, exposed, I think, very clearly for all to see. Now, yesterday, a jury found that the former president, Donald Trump, sexually abused the columnist E. Jean Carroll in a New York department store in the 1990s. Now, legally, that means we can say, factually, objectively, that Donald Trump, Republican president, is a sexual predator. Now, the court awarded $5 million in compensatory and punitive damages. Now, let's just hear, shall we? Because I think this is really important. I think this is quite an important case study, myself. Let's hear from the former Tory cabinet minister, current Conservative MP, and GB News presenter. Now, before I introduce this little clip, to be clear, he's being paid, and I kid you not, over £32,000 a month by the channel, which is around 800 quid an hour. This is an MP whose job it is to serve his constituents, to represent his constituents. That's supposed to be a full-time job. Instead, he's being paid through the absolute nose to come up with absolute shockers like this.
We said we'd bring some updates about the Donald Trump civil case. The jury, deliberating in the rape trial of Donald Trump, has found the former US president not guilty of the rape charges made against him. The civil lawsuit was brought by writer E. Jean Carroll, who accused Mr. Trump of raping her in a Manhattan department store in the 1990s. The verdict was returned as not guilty on rape charges. However, it did find that he sexually abused her. The ex-president was also found to have defamed Miss Carroll in a Truth Social post in 2022. The jury has awarded Miss Carroll $20,000 in punitive damages for battery claims against Mr. Trump, along with $2.7 million in compensatory damages for defamation by Mr. Trump. The total amount of damages awarded to Miss Carroll is $5 million, so that's about £4 million. I'm now joined by the US midterm Republican candidate for Arizona and supporter of Mr. Trump, Carrie Lake, and our very own Nigel Farage. Carrie, thank you so much for coming in. And as it's not a British election, I think without breaking any rules, I can wish you very good luck.
Thank you.
But tell me, what does this mean for the Republican Party? What's it mean for Mr. Trump's presidential hopes?
Well, I think people who are following politics in America know they're seeing what's happening. They're trying to line up as many lawsuits as they can against President Trump. This is part of their, what has now gone on for 8 years, a barrage of negativity and, in many cases, media lying and defaming the president. And now he's getting found guilty by a jury in New York, one of the most liberal cities in the world, frankly, in the country for sure.
Now, just to be very clear about who's actually in this discussion, one of them you'll be more than familiar with, horrifyingly familiar with. That is, of course, Nigel Farage, hard-right demagogue extraordinaire. Also, of course, a personal friend and ally of Donald Trump. The other, the American there, is Carrie Lake, a right-wing Republican who has previously shared COVID disinformation, gone on about mask mandates, taken on vaccine mandates, that kind of thing, supported the great lie of Donald Trump's election being stolen, opposed efforts to advance LGBTQ rights. We can go on. Lovely stuff from Carrie Lake. Now, actually, Green Party politicians have actually written to Ofcom, calling for GB News' license to be revoked, citing this particular section. They know that gives a wholly biased account of the verdicts in the trial of Donald Trump for sexual assault. As your own guidelines state, the requirement to achieve due impartiality is central to broadcasting regulation in the UK. Broadcasters are required to ensure that news in whatever form is reported with due accuracy and presented with due impartiality. This requirement is clearly breached by this segment yesterday evening, to say the least, because, as the letter notes, all three are pro-Trump, spoke in favour of Trump, long-standing Trump apologists, no attempt to provide any sort of balance. I mean, it's completely and utterly absurd, let's be honest with you. I mean, it should be said that Ofcom, which is normally a completely toothless waste of space, is actually led by someone who was a Tory live peer for many years. But they actually ruled this week, even Ofcom, that GB News broke broadcasting code for a second time. That was a segment involving Naomi Wolf, who has gone off on the deep end, I have to say the least, because of her anti-vax nonsense, which went unchallenged, where she compared the vaccine rollout to mass murder comparable to the actions, my camera's wobbling there because my cat's jumping on the table, comparable to the actions of doctors back in Nazi Germany. Now, what I want to focus on is the morality of Jacob Rees Mogg and right-wingers like him. Now, why am I bringing that up? Well, very straightforward. The reason is that Jacob Rees Mogg has been someone who has opposed, or very clearly publicly opposes, equal marriage and abortion in all circumstances, and that includes rape. That's what we're talking about with Jacob Rees Mogg. That's how ardent his supposed morality is on these particular issues. Now, Chris Brookmeyer, who is a author, wrote, like Jacob Rees Mogg, I too was raised a Catholic, but I don't recall the blessed are the pussy grabbers verse from the Sermon on the Mount. He has truly shown us all who he is. So shame on any media organisation that platforms this revolting wee creep. Again, he's not pulling his punches there. No, but the point here is, this is a man who opposes equal civil rights for LGBTQ people because he thinks equal civil rights for LGBTQ people violates his moral code. He opposes women's bodily autonomy when it comes to abortion. That violates his moral code, but shows no sign of anger or disgust when a right-wing politician is found guilty of sexually abusing a woman. Now, he knows, because actually Jacob Rees Mogg is not a stupid man entirely, that multiple women have accused Donald Trump of sexual misconduct. I do not actually really believe. I can't, to be fair, look into Jacob Rees Mogg's soul. Not that I, like him. Unlike him, I don't actually subscribe to a theological belief in a soul. But nonetheless, I can't actually look in the context of his mind. Does he really think all those women are just making it up, just coincidentally? That these women are just liars. It publicly accusing someone who clearly, if you cross him, he will unleash fury upon you. Does he think they're all lying? So he must know that this man, surely you know this, Jacob Rees Mogg, is a sexual predator. And yet, what his moral code tells him is to oppose equal civil rights for gay people, equal marriage, to oppose women's bodily autonomy, abortion, and yet not to denounce angrily and correctly Donald Trump for being a sexual predator. And this exposes right-wing morality, doesn't it? It exposes it in Technicolor. In the United States, it's very clear that the right wing have rallied around Donald Trump, who is clearly a moral disgrace on a whole range of matters, including, of course, when it comes to sexual misconduct. And yet, they're talking about the moral decline of the United States because of LGBTQ rights and because of women's rights. So, what right-wing morality actually opposes, I don't think we need to, in a sense, is this kind of obvious, but this just fleshes it out. It is about driving back the rights of women and LGBTQ people. It's not about any actual Christian morality at all. Obviously it picks and chooses because it doesn't take the bits, Jesus Christ, in terms of him standing up for, saying it's easier for a thick rope to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the gates of heaven. They don't tend to focus on that, do they? They don't seem to notice that Jesus had nothing to say about gay people or gay rights. What they do is they pick and choose the moral code, generally of the Old Testament and St. Paul, to justify oppression. And yet when it comes to a sexual predator, nothing. They rally instead behind that sexual predator. And that exposes the hypocrisy of Jacob Rees Mogg and all those like him. Please like, subscribe, and do support us on patreon.com/Joseph. I'll see you in a bit.